Good afternoon and welcome back. We are ready to start with the post-lunch session. I'll request you all to please kindly take your seats as quickly as possible. So good afternoon once again and welcome back. I'm sure you are rejuvenated after having enjoyed a very sumptuous spread. We are ready to start with this discussion, which is entitled Space-Enabled Precision and Deep Battles. We promise you a very engaging deliberation, so please join me in welcoming the esteemed chair and moderator for this session. May I request him to join us, please, amidst your applause. Air Marshal Anil Chopra, PVSM, AVSM, VM, VSM, retired, Director General CAPS. CAPS is also the knowledge partner for this symposium, so a very warm welcome to you, sir. We warmly welcome onto the stage the esteemed panelists for this session. Please join me in welcoming Air Commodore Abhijit Tokekar, Vayu Sena Medal, Commandant, DIPAC, Headquarters IDS. We warmly welcome Dr. Rituraj Kumar, Director, CAIR, DRDO. A warm and hearty welcome to Professor Brejesh Lall, Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. We extend a warm welcome to Mr. Anurag Garg, Head of Strategy, India, Thales. Let's give a warm applause and welcome on stage Colonel Amandeep Singh, Specialist, Indian Army. And a warm and hearty welcome to Captain Nitin Karyappa, Directorate of Naval Intelligence. So there they are, ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed panel, the esteemed chair. They're all set to take this discussion forward. Space-enabled precision and deep battles. I now hand it over to the esteemed chair.
Thank you for the welcome introduction and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to session 2, first session post-lunch. I can see well-fed faces and I sincerely hope that nobody is going to go to sleep. The hall is nearly full still. And that's great news for us. Everything about space is well known, how space is impinging on every aspect of our daily lives, but now we are going to get battle ready. We are going to see the future is in global reach and the long range precision strike. We have a great panel, but we have very little time. I have to finish this session in 1 hour, 10 minutes. And therefore, I'm not going to do any more preliminaries. The names of the 6 people, which I was to read out, has already been read out. We're going to start from the left. One by one, they will come. Of course, I will order them to start speaking. And then we will start with the right side. It will give us enough time for some Q&A session. And if I have to sum up anything, I'll do that at the end. May I now request Abhijit to kindly begin. Yeah.
Very good afternoon. I am Air Commodore Abhijit Tokekar and I am Commandant DIPAC. I have been given this challenging task of keeping you all awake to this session after a sumptuous meal. We all know space is the new frontier of warfare and the boundaries are now blurred. Adversaries operate well beyond the conventional means. This is the newest dimension other than the non-geographic dimensions like cyberspace or psychological warfare. Therefore, the assets in the space towards military operations have become very vital. The satellite reconnaissance to GPS-aided munitions, precision strikes, space-enabled capabilities have revolutionized the battlefield. For the panel, I would like to stick to my domain, that is more of things to do with ISR. And therefore, I will touch upon the imaging cycle, the sensor to shooter loop and the spin-offs thereof, the factors affecting precision targeting, and in my opinion, what is the way forward. Coming to the ops, the image cycle, we are all aware the indents are raised by the users, and these are collated at a central agency from where the payload planning is done. Post the payload planning, the TTC operations and the commands are uploaded to the satellite, which in turn does the imaging and dumps the data at the ground earth stations. Once the data is available, post the processing, the analysis is either done by a human interface or could be with the more modern AI now in place. And once the analysis is done, this is available to the user for further analysis, or if the user feels so or desires so, the direct data is also available to the user for carrying out his own analysis. Coming to the sensor and shooter cycle, the aim we all know is to shorten this loop as much as possible so that the turnaround time is the least. Towards this, certain requirements, firstly, sensors having better agility will give reduced timelines, wider swath, giving a wider coverage for what is being covered. AI on board will greatly help image, that is edge processing will help us in removing more of the useless data, that is images which are cloudy or images which are corrupt, to remove them from dumping towards the earth station and thus increasing the speed of communication. The AI models trained on board can give faster object identification, object detection, change detection, etc., wherein the human requirement would be greatly reduced. Coming to the ground segment, onboard edge computing is the requirement of the day. Notwithstanding that, the amount of data which is downloaded will need to be processed at a much higher speeds using AI or quantum computing, because the data which is received at the ground station, firstly, it's difficult to digest in case it's large, and more so to be able to analyze and absorb the intelligence part of it. The satellite data, as and when it is received, it is important that it needs to be in a common compatible format for all the users to be able to use it effectively, and the same needs to be efficiently transmitted to all the users at a fastest possible rate. The data which is received also, since the quantum is going to be very high, AI would be required to be able to absorb, derive intelligence and support the operational commander for taking a decision. So some kind of a decision support system needs to be developed, which will enable easier possibilities for the commander to take a decision. Having arrived at all this, the next step becomes neutralizing the target. For this, we all know that the data which is received in the ground station needs to be passed on to the platform, which is the targeting platform. And having sent the targeting platform all the data, post the attack, there is a need for carrying out the bomb damage assessment or the BDA, which will enable us for further tasking, whether we need to continue with the same targeting or we can go ahead with the next targets. Precision targeting per se, there are a few requirements which require high level of accuracy of the target coordinates. It will firstly depend on what is the source of the information. With satellite sensor, what is the accuracy and how well it can be integrated with the weapon systems. Next, the navigation accuracy of the weapon system. Once the data is available, the accuracy of the shooting platform, and initial harmonization of the data on ground, the system drift, all these will need to be catered. The solutions for this is self-explanatory. The data needs to be fairly accurate and standardized amongst all the users so that there is interoperability. The base layer, which is a prerequisite, needs to be extremely accurate. The digital elevation model, or which is popularly known as DEM, again the accuracy will depend for the high precision targeting weapons. Features like digital scene matching, area correlation, and terrain contour matching used by fair amount of advanced precision systems would greatly depend on what is the accuracy of the fed coordinates. In the previous panel discussion, Atmanirbhar Bharat was covered. So again, the buzzword of Atmanirbharta, there is a need for all of us to focus on indigenous products and to reach that level of accuracy where we do not, or we are not dependent on external agencies for giving accurate coordinate data. The way forward with more and more space applications coming and our adversaries gaining technological advantage in RPO, that is rendezvous and proximity operation, there is a need to have something like a load launch on demand capability where in case of any damage or part degradation of our satellites, we should be able to launch the standby satellites to provide redundancy for the sensors which are up in the space. Probably we can use the flexibility of changing the orbits of the satellite in case there are some specific targets which are of high importance, to be able to change the orbits, get a better spatial resolution, and maybe lose out the extra life of the satellite, or maybe we can do so with the near end of life satellites. The redundant command and control networks are of prime importance. We should have adequate redundancy so that in case of a cyber attack, we are still able to pass the data which is collected from the space-based assets down to the last man on the ground. Quantum technologies towards global communication and PNT capabilities also is a requirement which cannot be overemphasized. And with emerging disruptive technologies, we need to develop a countermeasure towards that, to build an intelligent force which is sufficiently equipped with high-level weapons and sees the dynamic situation emerging, and as I covered earlier, probably be ready to either avert any kind of attack on our own space-based assets, or to be able to launch redundant sensors once again to be able to reach the same status as before the attack. As of now, I would say not much considering the August gathering. Whatever thoughts I had, I've just put it down considering the small time which we were allotted, and I hope I was able to convey what was there in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Commodore, Tokekar, DIPAC. These are the guys who need the images. So the industry has, of course, they must decide what is the cycle time, how fast they want the images in consultation with service headquarters, and that will decide how many satellites we have to have, and then data processing he mentioned, usable data, support decision making, indigenize all the products, and build up redundancy both in communications and get everything secure. So now we go to the next speaker. On my left, Professor Brejesh Lall, Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. Please. 7 minutes, yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. So just as the Air Commodores explained to us what precision in a battlefield implies, I'm going to look at it more from research and development of solutions perspective, what are the implications of what he just talked about? The most important thing whenever we try to build solutions for something as critical as the military is understanding the user requirement. This is something that came up in the morning, and you cannot stress enough the fact that it has to start with what the user requires. But having said that, there are a few things that we should keep in mind when we go through this entire process of getting these algorithms and these mechanisms and these machines to work. The first thing that I want to talk about, and these are some generic thoughts before I come back to imaging and sensing. The first thing that we need to do is that in the age of AI ML, data is very, very important. Now, data is important both from the point of view of training the machine and also from the point of view of keeping it safe and secure from people you do not want it to get into the hands of. So while it is good not to expose critical data, it is very, very important to have a standardized method of collecting and storing data. Unless one does that, it is very, very difficult to have a vibrant industry that can develop solutions at a fast rate. The problem that in the morning we heard somebody say that they started with data analytics and very soon realized that the best way to get data is to collect it yourself. So from a data analytics organization, they became a company that started sending payloads over satellite so that they could correct the now this might have worked for them, but this is not how it works in general. So in general, my recommendation to the audience here is that whenever they collect data, they should make sure that some of it can be made available to the public, and whatever is secure and important for them should be available to a fixed set, but it should be available. One should not have to repeatedly collect the same data. This came up again in a different aspect in the morning when somebody said, what have we learned from the Star Wars initiatives which happened 30, 40 years ago? Where has all that learning gone? I'm sure there's a bit of it around, but there should have been more of it. So that's the first point that I want to make, that we should be very, very careful when we collect data. It should not be only for the immediate needs. It should be for, in general, making the area more vibrant, more capable, because it is difficult to send payloads up. These are very, very high-end payloads. They cost a lot of money and a lot of time to build. The second point that I want to make is that we should work towards having a vibrant open source community. We do not have enough work happening in the open source. Here again, even though we're talking to the people from the military here, but not everything needs to be protected. Some basic tools have to be built on top of, and these can become robust, strong if there's a large community working on it. It tests them and it uses its knowledge to be able to deliver something that is good. So these are two things that I would strongly recommend that people in this area should look at. This is a nascent industry, 4 or 5 years old. We can plan and we can do it right. Let's make sure that we do the data collection appropriately. Let's not be very myopic in the way we collect data. And secondly is, let us encourage open initiatives in the area, not for everything, but for some things that can be shared amongst stakeholders. Now, coming back to things which are specific, a couple of things that I'm going to talk about that we've been doing in our lab and it might be of use to the people here. When we say that we want to collect hyperspectral data, collecting hyperspectral data for understanding where you are. Now, why is hyperspectral data important? Because as humans, we give a lot of importance to what we are able to see. The visible spectrum is really from where we get most of our own intelligence, if we leave the machines out. Therefore, it seems to be the go-to mechanism for sensing, but that is not necessarily the case. The moment you get into the military kind of applications and even applications related to agriculture, climate, weather, at times visible spectrum is a problem rather than an asset. So hyperspectral is the way forward. Unfortunately, there is a trade-off between the kind of resolution you can obtain in the spatial domain versus the one that you can obtain in the spectral domain. So some of the work that we try to do back at IIT Delhi is in the area of super resolution. So given a multispectral data, can we keep the spatial resolution as it was, but increase the spectral resolution? Be able to identify a few bands which were missing in the data that was earlier collected. Now, this is important because even though when you input data to a machine and you train it to prepare a new band and then use that band to make a decision, it really is an unnecessary step. But a lot of times this data is consumed by humans, and when humans consume it, they want to look at it a certain way. Models have been built based on measurements on particular bands. Therefore, at times there are certain bands that might need to be generated, and therefore super resolution has a role to play there. The other area where super resolution can play a role is when you have hyperspectral data. So it has enough spectral resolution, if you will, but it might have poor spatial resolution. In such cases, can we come up with mechanisms to increase the spatial resolution so that you have usable data? Here again, I'm assuming that there's a human in the loop. There's a human who will eventually consume it. What we must understand here is that in case the end recommendation is coming from a machine, the super resolution step is unnecessary, or getting a new band is unnecessary. Another reason why we might want to do this is to generate a lot more data. The first thing that I mentioned was that we should collect data in a manner that is usable, but even then you might not be able to collect enough amount of data. So data augmentation is something that is very, very common in AI ML applications. Anybody who's done any amount of work in machine learning knows that at some stage or the other, he has or she has to resort to data augmentation. So data augmentation is something that is also enabled by super resolution, because you get data at newer bands. You might have data at for example, particular bands, and you might use it to generate data at difficult to obtain information bands. This is one thing that I think is important in times to come. The other thing that I want to spend some time on is knowledge rather than raw data. So there was talk of putting some intelligence at the edge so that some pre-processing, some curation can happen right on the satellite, and only relevant material comes down to wherever the command center is. Over and above that, there's also a need to understand what is it that we are choosing to keep, and what is it that we are choosing to ignore, and what is it that we are choosing to relay, and what are we buffering for a later point in time. This is what is known as extracting knowledge from the data rather than storing data in its raw form. So moving forward, people are going to move towards what is known as semantic communications. Today, communication is a fixed bit. It's syntactic. You collect data, you do some pre-processing, you leave some samples out, make sure that you are able to send the rest of the samples at a particular rate, the kind of rate that you can handle, the kind of error levels that you can work with. But if there is a mechanism by which you can convert the data into information, into intelligence or knowledge that can be worked upon, then it becomes much easier. So moving forward, even back in 1948, Shannon and Weaver had talked about 3 levels of communication. Syntactic was the lowest level, semantic is the second, and effectiveness is the third level. So we've sort of exhausted the syntactic level of communication and should aim to move towards semantic communication. So in summary, the 4 things that I've talked about today. The first is about data, collecting it in a manner that it is usable to people other than yourselves. The second thing is promoting open source. The third is the need for generative AI in data augmentation and other activities in this area. And finally, we talk about semantic communication as a mechanism for putting all of it together and converting it into a form that is easy to transmit and easy to infer from. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lall. So very clear that there is to be close coordination between the user, ISRO, industry, and academia. And the rest of the things he beautifully summed up himself, the 4-5 points. So we go to the next speaker, Dr. Rituraj Kumar, Director, CAIR. Yeah.
Thank you, Session Chair, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Since I have less time, I would directly come to the agenda. This session has 5 keywords: ISR, positioning, navigation, targeting, communications. And in the given time, I'm going to spend maybe 1 minute each to say 2 lines about each one of them. Firstly, ISR. And in the morning, DCITS correctly brought out the difference between information and intelligence, and I was anyway going to touch on that. So if we need to build ISR capabilities based on space assets, the first and foremost thing begins with data collection. Now, I think we have discussed this enough in the morning and right now by Professor Lall, that there is a trade-off between spatial, spectral, and temporal resolution. You can't have maximize all 3 of them simultaneously. So therefore, there is a context dependence with respect to the data that is of relevance in the military context at the tactical level and at the strategic level. And corresponding to that, the appropriate spectral, spatial, and temporal resolution has to be captured from a space-based asset. Now, another very important aspect of hyperspectral or multispectral is that ultimately, if we are going to use machine learning, one has to be very clear that there is a mechanism of adversarial networks being an attack on that machine learning, on deep learning methods. And the modern day camouflage are actually designed with that in mind. So therefore, you cannot have any system which can be camouflaged across every possible spectrum. And therefore, hyperspectral is an essential requirement in order to be able to detect camouflage that is designed as an attack on deep learning. Then of course, once you have the downstream data, one has to go ahead into the standard techniques of segmentation, detection, classification, change detection. One aspect that differentiates the military domain to the extent we understand it here, that most military features, especially the features of strategic interest, have very sparse data sets available for training a machine learning algorithm. So therefore, while the effectiveness of machine learning with respect to civilian requirements and to a certain extent tactical requirements have sufficient data sets available, if one were to say that can I use machine learning to identify a potential silo of a missile, that's not going to be a data set, that's going to be in thousands. So therefore, being able to generate synthetic data with respect to be able to train machine learning algorithms is an important capability, and that needs to be adequately augmented by industry and academia. There is no way that services can provide that data because that data doesn't exist. Once all of this is done, I think the point that DCITS brought out, DCITS, sorry. No, in the first session here. DGDIA. Oh, sorry. From the back, I couldn't get who said that. So therefore, when you are talking about bringing out the actionable intelligence, that's an act of fusion. And therefore, there is a standard Dasarathi model that exists with respect to creating a fusion hierarchy. And I think there needs to be adequate effort that is put. And Professor also brought out to be able to take it from syntactic understanding to semantic understanding. This classification, this gain with respect to the depth of understanding happens through the Dasarathi model. And these things are not existing in open source. They don't exist in open domain. And therefore, enough work needs to be done in India as a combination of government funded R&D, industry and academia in order to build these capabilities for Indian defense. Second point, coming quickly to positioning. There are 3 aspects of positioning that are relevant when we look at space-based assets. The first is being able to do accurate positioning of the ground, lat, long and azimuth using a space-based asset. This has started gaining some maturity in the Indian ecosystem. The second is being able to construct a space coordinate system with respect to space assets of relevance. So imagine you are having a ground coordinate system and a space coordinate system. We talked about Star Wars, we talked about ASAT in the morning. ASAT is an example where using a ground coordinate system, something is launched against an asset that is in the space coordinate system. Star Wars was an example wherein you had a space-based asset having a space-based coordinate system targeting an asset on the ground with all the relative motions and everything put into place. So therefore, this transformation which enables the joint operation of land-based and space-based assets is an important thing that needs to be done. And the third, which is an emerging area from the context of strategic operations, is being able to use the space-based assets as attack vectors on each other. So now you have two elements of space in an adversarial situation with each other. It was hinted by someone in the morning session. These things, the coordinate systems, the transformations, the datums for this kind of a thing still need to be worked out. The third point in the list was navigation. Navigation requires good quality vector data. Then you can run algorithms on that vector data. Unfortunately, in India, historically, we have taken cartographic charts and digitized them. That's not vector data. That is just digitized raster data, which doesn't make it amenable to navigation. Navigation is based on vector data. Now, with increasing capability of space-based satellite imagery, there is an urgent requirement of being able to use satellite imagery, and that too in hyperspectral range, to be able to automatically transform it into vector data. So therefore, the vector data of interest, once we get it into the domain of navigation, we could have Indian street navigation maps being created out of vector data, which is automatically generated out of Indian satellites. Enough corrections to that vector data will happen based on citizen input itself. So it could get into public domain. You could have reasonably correct data. All of us know the corrections of Google did not happen simply because Google had better algorithms, because it was crowdsourced. So how to leverage crowdsourcing? So you do the first iteration by actually creating the vector maps based on Indian satellite imagery, and you know that at least you can trust that satellite imagery, it doesn't have features hidden, and then use crowdsourcing to bring it to a certain level. After that, you can actually do ground truthing in the context of military, and then further annotation with respect to military. But this is an essential requirement to be able to do. Just 2 more minutes.
Nope.
The fourth point that was mentioned was targeting. Now, targeting requires sub-meter resolution maps, both in x, y, and z coordinates, all 3 dimensions. So lat, long, and azimuth. Now, for all of us who have operated the Indian military maps, you will see that every pixel movement of the cursor is not a smooth movement as far as the ground distance is concerned. It's a jump. And this is a capability that has existed in the West, has not yet fully come into India. And therefore, while there was a TPCR document created, which is in public domain, which talked of precision munition as one of the game changers for the country. But the precision weapon systems require sub-meter resolution mapping with respect to lat, long, and azimuth. And therefore, the ability to have that kind of a mapping and being able to correctly geo-register it, map it to a datum, and being able to create that high resolution image of the land is critical in order to be able to deal with precision munition. The last point was communication. Here the crux is how can space-based assets enable quantum communication. Most of the quantum communication strategies that have been experimented, at least in the country and world over, if you are using fibers, you have a limit with respect to the number of kilometers you can go, because the dark fiber simply cannot be engineered to that level of perfection. And therefore, how to use satellite as a hop in order to be able to have a longer range with respect to quantum key distributions is an essential imperative in order to be able to create secure communications at a larger level. With that, sorry for taking a few more extra minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rituraj. Thank you. Okay, so a few quick points. He said sorting out the coordinate system in space and on the ground. The space versus space combat, various types. I can talk at length about it later. Navigation using vector data. Crowdsourcing, good idea. We are already doing that. Sometimes we say there's a crash on the Gurgaon Delhi highway. And accuracy of data, target data, match the weapons CEPs, which are very small. And lastly, the satellite versus the quantum use of quantum computing. Our next speaker is Colonel Amandeep Singh, specialist from Indian Army. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the onset, I would thank CIA-INDIA initiative once again to enhance the knowledge structuring and base for all of us. With this as a brief background, my journey started within this space sector industry more than a decade back. As a serving officer, I have been in the same sector, handling the satellites and its operational effectiveness, augmenting the further military role. Ladies and gentlemen, being a soldier, let me just give it to you the highest battlefield in the world on earth, to be specific, is Siachen. Over there, why I refer to this is, over there, anything enemy to enemy, a post to post gap of more than few hundred feet or few feet matter a lot. The statement was to complement my next statement, which is there is something beyond an ultimate weapon that is called ultimate position. Here we come to the title of the present discussion, the precision and deep battles. Over there, please understand the high altitude at which the sensors are working, the sensors are looking down and assisting the militaries to conduct their operations. As it has been brought out that space is considered as the final frontier for the mankind and the ultimate high ground for the war fighters. Space as a domain for the next generation warfare has gained substantial prominence in the last 2 decades. Over here, I will just give a food for thought to think that minus space from your present life in 24 hours, just think of minusing the space component from your life, whether it is mobile connectivity, whether your travel connectivity, whether your navigation, hospital, industry, medical, business, we are back more than 50 years arena, which means the space has become an indispensable part of our day-to-day life, and beyond the conventional setups of land, sea and air operations, it has created a dimension which cannot be missed out for our planning and execution any kind of military operations. Now, if we talk about military operations, we always have military aims. With this, we have, as we all know, PNT, remote sensing, early warning, cyber operations, to understand the adversary's threat capability, post-strike battle damage assessments, coverage of denied areas. These are those military aims which I have covered very few, many are there, which forces us to give due weightage to this space segment for augmenting and increasing the military effectiveness. Now, beyond these military aims, we have intelligence aims. The intelligence aims include intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, the detection and the identification of the enemy locations, their deployments, the target acquisitions, the different verticals of our defense forces handling imagery intelligence, and with this military aim and intelligence aim clubbed and intermeshed together, we get a common operational intelligence picture, which gives a decision makers to act upon and flow with the warfare requirements. To be it on the specific forte, once we look upon the space segment warfare, we have to understand the deep battles, what the space will gives us, what kind of warfare which will happen in the outer space. Over on the earth, we know we have RT combat, we have hand-to-hand combat, we have so many precision weapon systems. But what will happen in outer space? There are no human beings, there are no soldiers, there are no active combatants. So what kind of battle a satellite will fight? To a satellite, to something else? So we have two options as discussed in the previous, as mentioned in the previous panel, kinetic and non-kinetic. What kinetic comprises of? It is anti-satellite operations, direct strike weapons, direct energy weapons, particle beam weapons, high altitude nuclear detonations, kinetic kill and robotic arms missions. All these, once we go in detail, it has been studied as per the policy, as per the doctrines, the future space policies. These kinetic options in future will come and force us to understand the space warfare segment. There can be many more verticals on this kinetic operations, which as the time grows, as the technology grows, as the military understanding of the space operation grows, will be seen. Coming to the non-kinetic options, as has been discussed already, the cyber operations, the radio frequency jammer operations, the spoofing of signals, laser beam attacks, chemical sprays, and to the extent of high power microwave attacks. With this, we have seen a lot of such operations which come in the open source by the adversaries who test as ASAT missions, who test other robotic parasitic missions. These all operations, these all space warfare operations gives us a clear signal, a clear way through and a clear understanding that the military operations not only are in the fourth frontier, but what in the fourth frontier. So the further depth of the fourth frontier has to be understood, has to be evolved, and has to be made part of the doctrine in detail.
1 minute.
With this, the initiative like DEFSAT, we must understand and go with this, being associated with the conference. The user, I consider myself as an end user, the industry who is present here, the academia who is present here. The DEFSAT kind of conferences gives us an opportunity, a very big opportunity, to have critical thought process, to understand each other's requirements and go for the national aim which we all are working together. Individually, we might be not connected. However, as a conference, as a group, since we were discussing a lot of things during our networking tea breaks and the lunch time, we need to integrate with each other so that the national aim is achieved. With this, I'll conclude my thought processes, and Jai Hind.
Thank you, Colonel Amandeep. Yeah. And thank you for reminding us of the great work our boys are doing in the Siachen Glacier. Let's all put our hands together for these boys. Yeah. Yeah. That's also to wake up some of the guys who are feeling sleepy. Yes. So So he explained to us what's the requirement of warfare, reminded us most of the things about ISR, PNT, targeting, communications, all 4 groups. And of course, he talked about kinetic and non-kinetic warfare in space. I had, by mistake, left out Anurag in between. So now I'm going to request Anurag. Yeah. He's, Anurag is the head of strategy, India, Thales.
Thank you so much, sir, for the introduction, and thank you for getting me here to speak on this topic. You know, as I've, if I go back like 20, 25 years when I was introduced to this whole topic, it used to be C2 and ISR, then C2 and ISR came together, then it became C4ISR, and now it is C5I2STAR2, you know, and as battles get more complex, as asymmetry increases, you know, people spoke about asymmetry due to cyberspace, unmanned, these things will keep becoming more and more complex as we go forward. But the art or the science is not in making complex things complex. The real art and science is to make complex things simple for the soldier on the ground, for the infantry, for the asset or group of soldiers and assets which are there deep in the battle or on the borders, so that actionable insights can be provided on the most simplest of devices to that soldier on the front. So that's really, in my interpretation, what the topic is today. And if I think about how a soldier on the ground would interpret the topic of today, it's probably 5 questions that the soldier would have, to, as a user, and we spoke about the user perspective. First is really where I am, which is where the positioning aspect comes in, and that's precision involved there. Who or what is around me, or where do I want to look, okay, which is where the situational awareness aspect comes in. Where do I want to go or how do I go? That's really the navigation part of it, which goes beyond positioning because it's the optimal route, less risky and all those aspects. What do I do? Which is where command and control in a connected fashion, if you were. And how do I coordinate, which is where the MIL-SATCOM or the communication part really comes in. So, in the sentiment of simplifying it, let's just hypothesize that these are the 5 questions that the soldier on the ground would ask us at the end of the day. Now, the complexity comes where we are looking at space-based assets who are operating not only in space and defending themselves against all the risks that Colonel Amandeep spoke about, but also be able to be relevant for the CONOPS in the sea, in the maritime domain, on land and in air. Okay, so that's kind of one dimension to this. How can I look at static objects, moving objects, objects maybe which are moving at hypersonic speeds? We're talking about ballistic missile detection and things like that, and be able to detect not only the visible things but things which are designed to be stealthy, at the end of the day. And it's really a cat and mouse game. So that's really, the problem we are trying to solve. The other problem we're trying to solve is, as a nation, while we allocate budget to more and more traditional weapons purchase, and there are so many gaps in so many domains that we're trying to do. It's really a question of how do we prioritize these challenges in the space domain, because we cannot really spend money everywhere. Okay, there are clear strengths that we have as a nation. There are clear gaps that we have as a nation. There are clear gaps which are very, very apparent when we look at the immediate neighbors, if you were. And these are the elements which we need to cater for. So I'm going to, in the next few minutes, try to propose, under control of all the learned forces, gentlemen and colleagues, to say that what I believe we should, as a country, prioritize. Okay. Now, the first thing is really, in terms of ISR, is really how can we have near real-time, all-weather situational awareness, which is really military Earth observation. Okay. When I say near real-time, it is a topic which can really be very expensive. How near? Okay, should it be every 5 minutes? Should it be every 30 minutes, 2 hours, 6 hours? And I'm talking about the revisit rate. Because the moment you're aspiring as a user for a higher revisit rate, it really adds 200-300 million, or if not more, to the budget that you need to allocate to ensure that kind of reliability and that kind of revisit. So really, while prioritizing this topic, we really need to say that what are the areas of interest as a union of Army, Navy, Air Force, that we really need a revisit rate as high as probably, or as good as really 2 hours or less, because the assets that need to really need to be put in the space need to be accounted for. The other aspect here is that I spoke about all weather, okay, and Galaxy spoke about optical radar, so I'll not go into that, but that's really mix of sensors over different payloads, etc., working in tandem as a constellation, not as singular satellites, if you were to be able to do that. But more importantly, and some of my speakers before talked about this, is really analytics, okay? And I'll take it a bit forward. Now, analytics, if you look at it, it's really chain detection, anomaly detection, feature detection, you know, all those kind of things. Because look at it like this, right? Every flight that takes off, every seats that empty, it's perishable inventory. The same thing happens with an optical satellite making a pass over Earth, over our area of interest. If you are letting that pass go and not using the images that is clicked, okay, or being programmed to click, we are really, you know, wasting that pass. And the big data that that satellite generates when it makes a pass is really not easy to analyze, and definitely not with a human sitting and, you know, looking at images. So again, the colleagues before have spoken about it. So how do we look at AI ML based analytics, which makes this not only human independent, but more proactive rather than us reacting to a situation and tasking satellites, sovereign satellites to do it. So I just want to touch on some of these things which are very important nuances. While we may choose to prioritize, you know, a sovereign military Earth observation capability where we are severely behind compared to our neighbors, if you will. The second topic is, you know, I believe that we need to prioritize MIL-SATCOM, okay? Not only because we're talking about theater commands, etc., but in the event of battles and wars, you do need very low latency capability. In the future, you would need IoT integration with comms as you go forward, and also some bit of redundancy introduced in comms, because we spoke about ASAT and many other ways our space assets can be taken away. So how can we really look at a MIL-SATCOM capability which is not only having effectiveness, etc., but it's flexible enough, and that's where the software-defined element comes in, which allows you to have separate beams over separate, you know, theaters or, you know, theaters of war, etc., to be able to do it. So I think that's important, and, you know, cyber hardening of it, right? Because you really don't want the data in rest, data in motion, signals to be jammed, blocked, what have you. The third element is really space situational awareness. You know, and Colonel Amandeep spoke about that. But really the challenge today, if you really look at it, the base case, today the question for us is, do we even have a near real-time enriched military-grade catalog of space objects? Okay, we are dependent on third-party sources, which comes to us in a delayed fashion, is incomplete. So do we really know? And you're not really talking about someone launching a satellite, saying it's a civil satellite and it's a defense. It's, you know, something people used to do in 1947. But the real thing is people are launching satellites and a satellite spawns from it, which is a military satellite, which is rather impossible to detect, you know, through conventional SSA means. And this really requires not just assets on ground, this requires assets in space, in LEO, looking at LEO and geo orbits with optical and RF sensors for someone to really get that kind of a true military SSA, space situational awareness capabilities. So I believe that really, you know, we need to go with this, and then you can add passive defense, active defense, you know, all those kind of elements to those payloads, so that not only, you know, we are protecting, but we are also, you know, having an offensive stance to anything that's really threatening in terms of kinetic, in terms of proximity, and all those elements. So, you know, I'm running out of time, but in a nutshell, I think what I'm trying to say is, while the topics are clear, I think we need to prioritize and really get action on the ground, really allocate budgets to some of these topics. Trust me, the technologies are available. We at Thales, we're a 20 billion euro group, 2.5 billion euro space company, doing Make in India with 70 suppliers and multiple primes in the space sector whom we are working with. So there's no dearth of technology. There's no dearth of talent. But we need to really prioritize and move ahead in a very clear and open fashion, so that the industry can make investments and go behind some of these topics and really fill the capability gap. I'll end there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anurag, for the industry perspective, space situational awareness, filling the gaps, prioritizing requirements as well as money. And of course, we need the real-time ISR, but real-time, as he said, could be 4 hours, 1 day, I don't know. And of course, mix of sensors and China pulling ahead, and that we need to do, you know, some catching up. Our last speaker is from the Navy, Captain Nitin Karyappa, Directorate of Naval Intelligence. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now from space domain, I'll just pull you down briefly to the maritime domain. Before I cover the space segment, I'd like to highlight upon what's challenging in the maritime domain. One of our areas of interest, that is the Indian Ocean region, is around 7,500 nautical miles in the east-west direction and 5,500 nautical miles in the north-south direction. As you know, it covers a vast expanse of geographical area with several sea lines of communication, which is important for the world business. Just some statistics, approximately 66% of the world's oil flows through this region, and 50% of the world's container shipments transit this region. And freedom of high seas in this vast expanse of IR means that the waters are open to all states, where they undertake navigation, overflight, lay submarine cables, etc. All vessels, including warships, enjoy right of continuous and expeditious passage without prejudice to peace, good order,
I
or
don't
security.
think this video is working. My video.
While a majority of the ships that transit in this region transmit on something called as an automatic information system through which we are able to track them, as mandated by the International Maritime Organization, there are some vessels which go dark. Dark ships refer to the ships that do not transmit on AS, hence the location and intentions cannot be verified. In 2023 alone, there are 337 maritime incidents ranging from piracy, smuggling, narcotics, etc. in this region. So you must understand, to ensure maritime security in such a vast expanse, early detection is very important, for which space capabilities come into play. Moving on to the naval requirement in remote sensing to ensuring space-enabled precision deep battles. As you're aware, tailoring remote sensing capabilities to diverse needs of different military branches involves considering unique requirement and challenges of each service. Remote sensing from satellites and aircraft contribute to maritime domain awareness. For the Navy and from the intelligence perspective, monitoring of harbors of interest can be done through EO and SAR imagery. Although analysis of EO images is more accurate while discerning the units of interest, the SAR images can be particularly useful in monitoring maritime activities due to their weather and nighttime, no weather or nighttime restrictions. Primarily, the change detections in harbor and airfields can be done through EO and SAR imagery. However, location of ships at sea by EO imaging sensors is at best a chance detection due to the small area that a satellite covers with high resolution. Due to the coverage of a wide swath at any given point of time, ELINT satellites will play a crucial role in maritime surveillance for activities such as detection of dark ships as well as development of shore-based infrastructure. And an ELINT input enables confirmation of a ship through high-resolution imagery. Next, the tailored use of remote sensing in military branches, coupled with convergence with weather and PNT data, significantly enhances the effectiveness and efficiency of military operations across diverse environments and scenarios. Accurate PNT data ensures that remote sensing systems can precisely locate and target objects or areas of interest. Since time is short, to sum it up, the key requirements of Navy from the naval intelligence perspective are: 1. Develop and deploy cutting-edge Earth observation satellites equipped with advanced remote sensing sensors, ensuring very high resolution, multispectral and all-weather capabilities. Second is ELINT satellites, as I covered earlier, are crucial for wide swath maritime surveillance. Due to the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean region, coverage of entire area with high resolution EO or SAR imagery is not feasible. Therefore, a constellation of indigenous ELINT satellite is crucial to maintain surveillance in the IR in the future. Next, establishment of established systems for real-time data acquisition and processing, enabling timely delivery of actionable intelligence to military decision makers on the ground. Integrate artificial intelligence and advanced analytics into remote sensing systems to automate data analysis, identify patterns, and generate actionable insights, adding to military decision makers in the strategic and tactical planning. And last, build a resilient and sustainable space infrastructure that ensures continuity in operations even in challenging conditions. This involves developing redundant systems and implementing measures for sustainable space activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Nitin Karyappa. Yes, the oceans are big, but we need to see the ships. After all, we have to attack them. But I must say that Indian Navy is doing an outstanding job in catching these Somalian pirates. Let's all put our hands together for them. Yeah, yeah, great. Absolutely. I'm very proud. And I, as an Air Force guy, recently wrote an article about how they're doing it. Dark ships, ILINT. There are two issues, over and above many other things which all the services require. That's what the Navy wants to track. So we have a little time for Q&A, 10 minutes. But before I get into Q&A, we have clapped for the Army and Navy, haven't clapped for the Air Force. Let's all clap for the Air Force. Yes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the house is open and I can see some smiles on some faces. So let's, somebody will carry the mic to the gentleman here. Yes.
Have you got the mic? Sir, so I'll go ahead and ask my question, sir.
Who's that?
Sir, Admiral Bunsen,
Okay,
sir.
it's good to stand. Good exercise for you.
All right.
So we can see you.
Right, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Sir, in the last session, I had asked this question, which remained unanswered. So I will repeat some of the audience have already heard it. The question was that in the mid-80s, there was a huge amount of research done on the Star Wars Strategic Defense Initiative. And billions in dollars had been spent till the Cold War suddenly came to an end. And all this research probably was just lost to academicians and DRDO scientists probably. So I just wanted to know whether we are reinventing the wheel or we have tapped into that kind of research that went in at that point in time. Is it available? Recently I read a paper which said that all this research that had gone in, it is available in the open domain. I couldn't find for myself. Obviously, it is not my area of expertise, but I just thought maybe the director CAIR or the from IIT Delhi, you would have done that. Any response to that?
Yeah.
The research involved many domains. Certain domains were classified and continue to remain classified. So I would not get into that. That's not in public domain. But what came out in public domain, or at least is reasonably understood, and now a lot of industries have also globally tagged onto it, relates to high energy directed weapons. So therefore that part of it has come out reasonably, and therefore that is how to create high energy weapons, what should be their profiles in order to deal with atmospheric dispersions. Many such things that were done as a part of SDI are available in public domain, and that can be searched. You may like to augment.
No.
Thank you, that's a good
Okay.
answer. Thanks. Complete.
Yeah, please.
Just to add on, sir, the research, what is available, what was done, has at the non-classified part, as on date have been given a structure, and as General Man is there, the Army Design Bureau is in conjunction with the industry and the academia had taken great and very good initiatives so that the user's requirement formally be understood, given a clear structure, and the speed at which the results are to be achieved should be fastened. So that research is now taking up shape and at a very fast pace.
Okay, next. Yeah, yeah. Okay, Mike, quickly.
In the olden times, we had the army because there were the land taxes. The army was protecting the business. We move on to the maritime, and there was the navy protecting the business. If you don't have any space commerce, this infrastructure will fall flat. Right now, it's just SATCOM. And so I think that unless and until you go into asteroid mining, spaceports, and if your captive imagination goes on to that, you will have spacecrafts hiding in deep space ports and coming and attacking space colonies or on Earth. Till such time, this USSR versus US Cold War race might not be frugal in that sense that we have to get some source of space commerce so that people invest in that manner so that it can sustain. So the idea is sustainability of this industry.
Okay, that's coming. That's coming. Okay, questions.
Thank you, panel, for this amazingly interesting lecture. My name is Ameya Kelkar, and I'm from the Center for Land Warfare Studies. My question is, the panel generally agrees that open source models will actually help better and further research in a quicker manner. My question is, sir, given that anything on the internet or anything that is digitized can potentially be tampered with or manipulated, to what extent can our present artificial and machine learning models ensure these open source sort of architectures are free of tampering and are free of any sort of negative effects for our later programming of our models? Thank you, sir.
AI has a role to play there, but then again, the way every time you build an AI model, it itself is exposed to being attacked. So it is a cat and mouse game. You have to keep improving. So AI, to answer your question, yes, AI can be used to protect, but what AI you make today is not for all times to come. You will have to keep on making sure that with time you sort of improve your AI, which is trying to catch whatever hazards are being made to the open source. But open source is an important point. See, the problem with open source is that while protection or making it being reliable might be an issue, but in India a bigger issue is a large enough committed community to work in open source. This is a problem. Let's hope we have to worry about 5 years down the line. Today the problem is, do we have enough committed coders who are willing to contribute to the open source and make high quality material available to people who want to make use of it commercially or otherwise?
Okay, one last question. Yes.
I just want to answer that question. So there is already an open source community available for defense technology. We have done almost 6 Digital India hackathons and 2 Smart City hackathons where the defense forces and their solutions have been done. There is one part which we are lacking is industry academia collaboration, and the digital identity is the answer where we need a permission blockchain. So one area where armed forces or Indian Army can come up and say, okay, this is what the smart contracts we need to build, and Web3 association open source can do it, be it GitHub, be it Google developer group. So we have a lot of community, including Solana, Polygon, XYZ in a cross-chain. But at the same time, we need permission blockchain so that everything that we are building is protected and it's completely 100% indigenous and going to be used for our armed forces for next 5 to 10 years. So we need to build that roadmap, and also a little bit funding has to be allocated through the incubation centers or accelerators so that these products which are being built in the launch pads can also go to the test beds. Thank you.
Okay, one last question.
Myself, Pravas, I actually run a defense tech accelerator and building a fund, which is an alternative investment fund.
Where are you?
Here, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, can I speak?
Yeah. Question. Somebody raised their hand.
Hi, I'm Naresh. I'm from CSDR. So jumping off from Mr. Anurag's point of view, we need to prioritize the data. That's what he said. So from Indian military's point of view, what sets of data we need to prioritize? Is it optical or is it SAR? Because US Department of Defense has the ability to give contracts to different startups like Maxar, Planet, and Pixel even. So due to the limitations of Indian defense budget, what sort of data sets we should prioritize from a military point of view? I'm opening the question to the panel here.
Please understand this aspect that as far the military usage is concerned, we need more of resolution. So the EO gains more importance. SAR is complementing that EO aspect. I'm talking on the operational, since you touched upon the military requirement. So pure operational in the immediate tactical depth or the operational or the strategic depth. First, my For me, the relevant thing is to detect, then to identify what the adversary is doing, what its deployment or movement and all those related military aspects. But the resolution, submetric resolution is great of importance. But again, it has challenges because of the weather constraints, the cloud coverage, the denied areas, the reverse slopes, wherein the sensors, because of the shadow, the sun angle and all those related orbital payload planning operations aspects, SAR also complements. Underground things, SAR, then hyperspectral. So it is basically a combination. The earlier panel has also suggested to the audience, and they were discussing that the combination, the integration, it is the magic is in the integration now. We have all understood individually EO, SAR, hyperspectral, multispectral, panchromatic, all things are good. But now it is the technology has grown, industry academia is together, the user is placing the requirement. So get us the integrated module for the best usage. Thank you.
Can I?
Yeah.
I just want to clarify, when I said prioritize, it was not really prioritizing data sets. Yeah. It was prioritizing where we as a country make our investments in building sovereign capabilities and do opposite to what you're suggesting, reduce dependence on foreign sources of data. So I just wanted to clarify that. And within that, then we need to think what we should prioritize as investments.
Okay, so we now will close the session. Militarization of space already taking place for some time. Weaponization also taking place. Important we get our SSR right. Important we defend our assets in space. And important we have a capability to be able to attack the adversary assets if push comes to shove. And that may become a deterrent for us. Request you all to put your hands together for this great panel. Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for listening to us very, very attentively. Yes.
Thank you, esteemed chair. Thank you, esteemed panelists. May I request you all to kindly take your seats back amongst the audience. And meanwhile, while we are taking some time to prepare the stage for our next session, which is Collaborative Frontiers, Synergizing the Defense Innovation Ecosystem. This will be a panel discussion. Meanwhile, I have some important news to share with you. This is regarding tomorrow's session, which is happening immediately after the tea break, that is tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. As you all are aware, it is a very interesting session, and I promise you a full house. It is the Industrial Space War Games session.